All right, who here saw this? This was to be expected. Qantas mandates COVID-19 vaccine for all workers. There's Alan Joyce there. He was very much on board with the idea of mandates from the start, wasn't he? He even spoke about passengers getting the jab and not just limited to international passengers. So let's have a look here. Qantas makes COVID-19 vaccination mandatory for all staff. Goes on to say the airline said in a statement that frontline staff such as cabin crew, pilots, airport workers will be required to be fully vaccinated by November 15th, while all remaining employees will need the jab by the end of March. All right, and I think due to the change in policy from the Fair Work Commission, it's going to be harder and harder for employees to actually stand up for their rights. That's why we need the unions to stand up for them, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So there he is, CEO Alan Joyce. He had a few things to say. He said, quote, "Making sure they are vaccinated, given the potential of this virus to spread, is so important. And I think it's the kind of safety leadership people would expect from us." So he considers it leadership, taking away the bodily integrity of employees, removing their right to choose if they want to participate in this or not. That's what this man considers to be leadership. What an absolute disgrace. He goes on to say, "It's clear that vaccinations are the only way to end the cycle of lockdowns." Well, Alan Joyce, have you read the Great Barrington Declaration? Other people have other ideas, and they're not just random people. We're talking about tens of thousands of medical professionals. All right, it says here that Qantas Group conducted a survey, including those working for Jetstar, from 12,000 respondents, the airline said 89% of employees had already been vaccinated or at least planned to book for the jab. Yeah, well, you know, when you instill the fear of God into people's hearts and you drum it time and time again for extended periods of time, it's unsurprising that a survey would result in 89% in favor of it. Is that fair enough? It's like you see these... It's like if I ran a survey on my Facebook page, right? Do you support mandatory vaccinations? I could not use that data to bring to any sort of real, objective debate, because overwhelmingly, my MCJ supporters, we do not support mandatory vaccination. Well, I don't think there's anyone that is a fan of MCJ report that supports it. So that would be, it would be falsified data, right? Because it would be not falsified, it would be legitimate data. No, I misspoke. It would be a confirmation bias. I would be using confirmation bias to produce data to then use for some other purpose, and that would be wrong. And that's what I think Qantas has done with this survey right here. I believe that they've capitalized on a confirmation bias due to the heavy leanings of the corporate side of Qantas. That's me speculating, but I think my speculation holds merit. All right, it goes on to say here, only 4% were unwilling or medically unable, right? And they'll just be tossed to the side like they don't matter. Says here, many of our people said they would feel concerned about working with unvaccinated colleagues. Well, who made them feel concerned? Who put the fear of God into these people's hearts? Did they become fearful and concerned on their own? Or did it happen because they happened to spend multiple hours per day sitting in front of a television and not watching the MCJ report? It goes on to say, we understand that there'll be a very small number of people who decide not to get the vaccine. That's just their right, but it's our responsibility to protect everyone and this and that. That's their right, but it's our right to fire them and to discriminate against them based on their vaccination status. So that's basically what the guy's saying. So it wasn't that long ago. This was actually from November, right? Look at this. Alan Joyce slammed over COVID vaccination rule for Qantas flights. So he slammed last November, and now he's celebrated? I mean, let's have a look at what he said regarding compulsory vaccination for people travelling on flights.
Vaccine, are you going to require all of your passengers to be vaccinated before they get on a plane?
Yeah, we are looking at changing our terms and conditions to say for international travellers that we will ask people to have a vaccination before they can get on the aircraft. What do you need that domestically? We'll have to...
Yeah, I don't want to listen to this guy anymore. You know what? We saved Qantas. That's right. You and me, the Australian people, the taxpayers, we saved them. Look at this. Qantas on track to collect $2 billion of support as Morrison government criticised for not seeking stake. All right, so $2 billion not paid by the government, paid from you and me. We saved Qantas. The airline industry was hit so hard during this COVID situation. But we, the Australian people, we saved them, And now what does Qantas do? They spit in our face by trampling over the rights of their workers and by potentially seeking to, and I think they will, impose vaccine requirements for travellers. Look at this. Qantas is on track to receive $2 billion in government support by the end of the year. And also the airline collected more than $1.2 billion in federal government support last year, including JobKeeper and aviation-specific programs. So just like when we, the people, propped up SPC, what did we get in return? A slap in the face. We propped up Qantas, and what did we get in return here? Another slap in the face. Now, all right, just going back here, back to the show, I have Sydney George back. That's right, our New South Wales correspondent. He has some thoughts in relation to what's going on with Qantas, and also making some statements in regard to the Transport Workers Union and whether or not they're going to step up and actually speak up for their workers. So I'm going to play the clip with Sydney George for you right now. All right, we're joined once again by our New South Wales correspondent, Sydney George. George, welcome back to the show. And could you tell us a little bit about where you are today and what's happening?
Yeah, we're back here at the Transport Workers Union House down here at Minchinbury at John Hines Avenue. You can see transport workers deserve a safer industry. You can see their logo behind there. What hit the tabloids hot in the press today, that Qantas was the second company to mandate COVID-19 vaccination for their workers.
Yeah, we saw that before, George. So what's your message to the TWU in relation to the new mandate imposed by Qantas?
Okay, in regards to the new mandate, we've seen the Transport Workers Union stand up to Alan Joyce and his board in regards when they wanted to stand down 2,500 loyal ground workers so they couldn't have an EBA or collectively bargain by outsourcing their work. They had a massive victory at the federal court challenging Qantas, and they won, and Alan Joyce had egg on his face. The question I'd like to know, would the Transport Workers Union represent the Qantas members once again if they choose not to get the jab? That is the question, Morgan.
That's a really good question, George, and I will ask our audience out there to perhaps send an email also to the TWU in relation to that question. All right, now, New South Wales, George, it looks like people are really locked down and having a bad time. We saw that more ADF personnel have been deployed to the streets. Would you mind talking a little bit about what's the vibe like, say, specifically in Western Sydney in relation to all these new and even more encroaching restrictions?
The people in Western Sydney feel totally abandoned by the political elites. Doesn't matter if it's from the Labor Party or from the Liberal Party. There's no voice in Western Sydney except for Tanya Davies, and she's the only one speaking up for the members of Western Sydney. You think that the Labor Party would actually stand up more because Western Sydney is predominantly a blue-collar suburb, but we have a Conservative MP actually standing up for workers. Talk about the irony of that, Morgan.
Yeah, absolutely, George. There's a lot of irony there. Labor really quiet on these mandates, and we don't see anyone really from Labor standing up for workers' rights to choose whether or not they want to participate in this vaccine. Now, before we wrap it up today, George, was there anything else you wanted to touch on?
I want to say to the people at Western Sydney and southwestern Sydney, look, Gladys Berejiklian and John Barilaro can't do this forever. Something has to give. Just hang in there and don't give up hope. You've got Monica from Reignite Democracy Australia speaking up. You've got other people also speaking up. You've got the Liberal Democrats. You've got David Lembrick. You've got now Campbell Newman speaking up. And how great is that, Morgan?
Yeah, that is really awesome, and we have very high hopes for Campbell. He's been doing a great job. All right, Sydney George, on behalf of the MCJ audience, thank you so much for your updates, and we hope to have you back on the show really soon.
Thank you, Morgan, and thank to our audience at the MCJ report.
Thanks. Good on you, brother. Chat to you later.
Okay. Cheers, mate.
All right. Thank you very much, Sydney George. And here's some good news. Sydney George will be covering the action from the protest on Saturday in Sydney. That's right. So he will be there working for MCJ Report as media covering the action. So there will be a live stream from Sydney covered by Sydney George on Saturday. Thank you very much, George. I'm not sure if you're in the broadcast. And by the way, let me just ask the question, who here loves Sydney George? Let me ask you that. Anyway, moving along here. This was a survey that Sydney George brought to my attention here. from Big Rigs National Road Transport newspaper. So this is a really big transport publication. It says here, the PM tells us that lockdowns will end once 80% of the population is vaccinated. Are you on board? Let us know where you stand in the poll below and in the comments section. All right, so 57% said no thanks, not for me. 43% said yes, I'm getting the jab. So we see, and that's from 1,200 survey respondents. And, this is Big Rigs National Road Transport newspaper, so it's not as if their audience would necessarily lean one way or the other on this particular topic. So I think it's safe to say that there's a lot of people out there that are not happy with the government's plan to try and use these coercive measures to get everybody vaccinated. And what we've seen today is that the unions, the construction unions in Queensland, are actually taking a stand on this as well. All right, but before we get to that, I just wanted to show you something while we're still on the topic of Alan Joyce, and that is that Alan Joyce is not always particularly liked by everyone. So this is a little bit unrelated, but we have to have a bit of a laugh because it can't be just doom and gloom all the time. Who here remembers this? 2017, that's right, I had to look it up to make sure that it was real. I never knew about it, but there was a disgruntled man, a critic of Alan Joyce. Alan was addressing a conference, and this bloke right here decided that he was going to put a pie in Alan's face. Check it out, I got the footage.
Now, it's been 6 months since I've been here to announce the... heck.
The business breakfast was well advanced when the grim-faced attacker dished up what he thought was a just dessert. Qantas CEO Alan Joyce and 600...
Yeah, so as you can see, not everyone's a massive fan of this particular guy. Now, the bloke that actually put the pie in his face, he said that he specifically chose a pie that he thought would not really result in any injury or, sting the eyes or anything like that. And it was just... He obviously got charged for assault and there were charges laid, etc. So I just, on the topic of Alan Joyce, and while we're still there, he reminded me of somebody. Who here knows this guy? Put your hand up if you remember Frank Vincent. Don't they sort of look the same? Frank Vincent, he was a favourite of mine growing up. He was in a lot of the gangster movies like Goodfellas, Casino, Sopranos. He was never a lead actor. Sadly passed away in 2017. Great actor. But Frank Vincent was the type of guy in a movie that just went in there and took care of business. And you know what? This pie guy kind of reminded me of Frank Vincent in a few ways. But anyway, that's not really here nor there. I just said that to try to be funny, make you laugh, because otherwise it's just all doom and gloom. We don't want that. We're still allowed to have a laugh, right? We're still allowed to have a sense of humour. Will the government try to criticise that? What's next by the government? No joking about coronavirus. I mean, I can imagine them trying to do that anyway.